Good morning to everybody else who I didn't get a chance to say hello to. We once again have a great number of attendees, and I will not waste another moment of time as we get started to tell you about this wonderful program to the Caucasus region happening at the end of September, early October next year. And for those of you who are new to us at Wheel and Anchor, just a couple of quick words about what we're all about, and which really is, we started Wheel and Anchor. I started Wheel and Anchor about 5 years ago with the vision of creating a travel community for like-minded Canadians from across the country who have a passion for travel and not just sort of going the usual way that group tours have been structured in the past. I've been organizing tours for Canadians for the better part of 30 years. And I realized some years ago that the way that the industry was moving and so on was perhaps not conducive to the traveler in us, the adventurer, and to this idea of having the feeling like you're going with friends. And so our mission at Wheel and Anchor is about bringing people together who like to travel in a more relaxed way, in a more focused way, and bringing all those people together. The picture at the bottom left, which I'll show you again, is actually taken from our group in Georgia at Pheasant Tears Winery, which I'll tell you about in just a moment, where it was one of the stops on our trip before. And when we travel the Wheel and Anchor way, as I like to say, we try to organize our trips so that we stop a little bit longer than most other tours. And in doing so, we just get that little bit of extra time to feel like we've become a part of the place. And that's my definition of being well-traveled. For sure, we all have our bucket lists that we like to check off, and, all the countries and so on. In fact, after this webinar, I'm going to have coffee with one of our regular members who was actually on this trip to Georgia and Armenia when we went in 2018. And he's traveled to more countries than I have. And it's always interesting talking to Richard because, he's exactly epitomizes what so many of our members like to do. Sure, we want to see a lot of the world, but we want to see it in a way that allows us to sort of think back on the memories of it and not just, oh, it was a Tuesday, I must have been in Rome kind of a thing. So that's our mission, again, to have our members become really well-traveled and connected with each other and with the places that we visit along the way. I see Carol has joined us from down in the US. Thank you for joining us, Carol. One of our not too many members from the US and who was with us earlier this year. Thank you for joining us, Carol. It's great to see you. We had such a grand time in Madeira earlier this year. Joining me today, as usual, I'm Gordon, founder of Wheel and Anchor, and I'm here with Joel Curry, who's always hiding in the background. He does our technical support and puts together these beautiful presentations for us. And of course, Paula, who is our senior trip specialist, who is many of you will already spoken to on the phone, probably more times than once. And if you haven't, Paul is always anxious to get your phone calls, or maybe you're not so anxious these days.
I'm always happy to hear from everyone.
Today, Paul and I are going to take you on a little journey around these places in Eastern Europe. And of course, this is far Eastern Europe. In fact, this region is on the border between Europe and Asia, and I'll get into a little bit about that later. And I'm going to take you on a tour, having been there with this group before, and we're going to explore these fascinating countries that most of us know very little about. And that's part of the beauty of this region, because we talk a lot about wanting to go off the beaten track, and with most places in Europe that we travel to frequently, it's a bit tougher to get off the beaten track. Or whenever I say off the beaten track, people, and then you mention places, and if you've never heard of it, it's like, well, why would I want to go there? And so this is kind of like what Georgia and Armenia are all about, because it's not a place you'd immediately think of going. And yet our group that went with us in 2018, you can see a picture of us here again at Pheasant Tears Winery in the Alizani Valley. Many of them had sort of stumbled across us. This was, as I say, our first official Wheel and Anchor trip back in October of 2018. And we had a fantastic time. The trip, I think, exceeded all of our expectations, even mine, and that takes something. And so this time around, we've taken all of the amazing highlights and so on that we did, and we've made it even better, because that's just how I work. I don't, for me, nothing is the status quo. There's always something we could do a little differently, a little bit better, a little more uniquely than the time before. You can see here, this picture brings back a great memory, because we made an impromptu stop at the town of Signagi. I'll tell you about it, because we spotted a sign for a zip line, and I thought, oh, who wants to go zip lining? And everybody looked at me like I was crazy, and yet half the group did it, and we did this amazing, and they, again, it was an experience that was completely unplanned, unexpected. But that's kind of how we like to roll, because again, that's the memories you and Richard, who's pictured there in the back in the blue shirt, was just traveling with me in Scandinavia, and we commented on this zipline adventure that you can't help but have this kind of thing stick out in your mind as a memory from our trip. So I okay, so let's get on with the itinerary. First of all, let's look at the map. Again, most people, if you ask them where Georgia is, immediately they think of Atlanta, and of course this has nothing to do with our friends down south, but rather we're talking about two countries that are in the Caucasus region. When we say Caucasus, we talk about the range of mountains that extends along the north shore of the Black Sea, the southern border of Russia, and over to the Caspian Sea. So Georgia and Armenia, as you see at the inset at the bottom left, nestled between Russia to the north, Turkey to the southwest, and Azerbaijan is to the east of Armenia and to the southeast of Georgia, and then you have Iran as well. So that's the corner of the world. Again, a lot of people don't think about coming into this region. We fly into Tbilisi, capital of Georgia, from where we will begin our journey, first of all in the east, in the so-called Gergetti region, which is in the shadow of the Caucasus Mountains. We'll then spend a number of days in the capital itself in Tbilisi. We'll go up into Casbegi, in the shadow of Mount Casbegi, one of the highest mountains in Georgia. And from there, we'll head down to a little bit into the western part of Georgia, crossing the border then to the south, hitting Gyumri, which is the second largest town in Armenia, and finishing up in Yerevan, the capital of Armenia. And I can imagine, as I mention all these places, you sort of conjure up some image, or maybe no image, because you have no idea what it's really like. But hopefully today will give you a little bit of a taste of this, and it'll sort of make you go, yeah, maybe that's a place I'd like to visit. So looking at the day-by-day itinerary, we're going to start off flying into Tbilisi. I'll be honest with you, these aren't the easiest places to travel to, because there just aren't as many flight connections as there are to mainstream cities in Europe. That being said, it is improving again as we get out of this pandemic. And so what you'll find is a lot of the flights arrive early in the morning, or sort of in the middle of the night, because that's the only way to get there. Regardless, when we arrive in Tbilisi, no matter what connection that you might take, we will pick you up. There'll be a dedicated transportation for us, and we're going to take you right over to Gergetti, in the, as I say, in the Alazani Valley, in the shadow of the Caucasus Mountains. And so from here, we're going to spend 3 nights. And again, one of the improvements we made on this trip from when we went there back in 2018 is that we try and spend more time in places. So I don't like 1-night stays. I don't even like 2-night stays, although they're unavoidable in some places. We're going to be spending 3 nights in Tsinandali, which is one of the towns in the Gergetti region in the Alazani Valley. And from here, we can explore various bits of this vast, wide green valley, which is really the center of winemaking in Georgia. And again, you may or may not have tried Georgian wines in your life, but they actually belong to some of the oldest wines in the world. The winemaking in this region, they consider to be the oldest in the world, dating back 8,000 years. Some of the techniques that were used then are still very much practiced today. But the grape varieties that you get when you are there are quite, some of them are similar. They grow some Cabernet, they grow some Sauvignon Blanc, but they have grapes like Saperavi and Ricatsikli and other names that you can hardly pronounce that you've never heard of. Some of them you like, some of them you won't. But from our base in Sinandali, we're going to spend a couple of days. We're going to tour to places like Nekrezi, which has this amazing monastery. And I recall when I was doing my preparation for this webinar today, I found some drone videos that I had taken. I'm going to put them together in the coming weeks and send you all out some beautiful drone shots that I took from these amazing towns and monasteries and castles that we visited, because those were the days when it was a new concept and you could fly your drone anywhere, because I was the only one. Nowadays, of course, you can't do that hardly anywhere anymore. So we will visit Nekrezi, we will visit Tel Aviv, a farmer's market in the one of the villages in this valley. Because here's another interesting point. I'll just keep moving the photos forward as I talk about this. One of the fascinating things about Georgia is their food culture. And again, it's not something that you immediately, because again, who's had Georgian food before, unless you happen to have a Georgian restaurant in your neighborhood. But one thing that, again, if you were to ask the people that went on the trip before what they enjoyed most, was the incredibly tasting food, particularly the produce, the vegetables. The tomatoes, I still say, are the best I ever had in my life. One of the contributing factors is Georgia in particular, and Armenia. They were all relatively poor countries that were part of the Soviet Union, of course, as we all know, and they were so poor that they couldn't even afford to import fertilizers and pesticides and all the rest of that kind of stuff. So by its very nature, a lot of the food in Georgia is organic, because they'd never had the money. So they didn't, embrace all of this new technology in the last century. And of course, that's now come to their benefit, because the quality, the flavor of the vegetables is amazing. It doesn't look pretty. It's not all shiny and like our vegetables we find at the supermarket at home. And when you'll see that when you go to the farmer's market in Tel Aviv, but you kind of see food how it's supposed to look. Anyway, an interesting anecdote. While we're here as well in this region, again, because the focus is winemaking, and this is also a breadbasket of the country, we'll see this ancient art of kvevery, winemaking, which is where wine is fermented in a giant clay pot that is buried in the ground. So it makes wines with a very distinctive flavor. Whether you're into wine or not, at the very least, you'll get to sample the way that wine has been made for thousands of years in this region. We'll also stop at this town of Signagi. This is actually where we did the zip lining back in 2018. It's a walled city with a 4-kilometer long medieval wall, 23 towers, gates, a lovely village to just wander around. They also have markets with local handicrafts. The feeling here, because it's not nearly as touristy as the mainstream parts of Europe. I mean, you'll definitely see other travelers going around. It's becoming more and more popular. At least it was up until the start of the pandemic. But when you see the local shops and the markets and so on, it has this feeling of authenticity that is lost in so many other places, because everything's made in China now, and again, Signagi is one of these towns sitting up on a hill with a view over the valley. You see the Caucasus Mountains in the distance. Really, really just charming, beautiful scenery. So our 2 whole days that we spend there, our 3 nights, will give you a great sense of the rural part, the winemaking part of Georgia. From there, we are going to head back to the capital city, where we flew into Tbilisi. And once again, you probably have little concept of what Tbilisi is all about. And we're going to spend 4 nights there. And the last time we were there, I think it was 3, and it just wasn't enough. That's why I thought, you come to these places, for most people, it will be a once in a lifetime trip. why not spend a bit of extra time? We've actually allocated 2 free days because we just if there was a complaint about the last trip, it was number one, there was too much food because they're very generous in their hospitality there. And it was that we didn't spend enough time in Tbilisi. So now we have adequate time while we're in this town. So if you can picture a city that is surrounded on the whole southern border by these beautiful tall mountains, the Narikala Fortress sits on top of it all. There was a picture of it in one of the earlier slides. So sorry, it's hard to describe in words how the city looks in pictures. And dotted around, you have these magnificent churches. Now, let me tell you, when you're reading the itinerary, you'll read, oh, there's this church and this monastery and all the rest of it. And so, a lot of the focal points on the program are around the churches, because of course it played such a significant role in the evolution, in the 2000 years of civilization in this part of the world. But believe me, you and I are probably on the same page in that I'm not interested in the ABC tours. We all know what ABC means, right? The interesting thing about these churches is not only are they very different from what you'll find in Central Europe, Western Europe, but the Orthodox architecture is in and of itself fascinating, but in particular, it's the location of these churches. It's standing outside and looking at the, huge Caucasus mountains, or in the case of the Matechi Church here, which is just basically in the center of Tbilisi. You look down over the city, over the river that flows through, over this sort of mixture between modern and old buildings, and you really get a great sense of the incredible landscape that's here. So again, while we're in Tbilisi, we are going to definitely take a cable car up to the Narikala Fortress. We're going to stroll around Rustaveli Avenue, which is their sort of pedestrian street. It's a narrow street at one part with cafes and restaurants. This is the part that sort of does make you feel a little bit like you're in Western Europe, but at the same time not, because the people look a little bit different. The architecture is a bit different. Tbilisi is known for these buildings with the balconies, like you can see here in the center of this picture. In fact, the whole side of the old town, which sits underneath the Narikala Fortress that you see at the top of the picture, is all known for its colorful covered balconies on the front of all the houses. So if you Google it, you'll find some wonderful pictures of Tbilisi. And when you take the cable car up to the fortress, you get a terrific vantage point. You might even want to do it more than once, because you can hardly snap your camera fast enough to capture this very unique style of architecture that they have there. Another thing, and again, I mentioned we have 2 full free days. And when I say they're free, you're not going to be wandering around what to do, because we're going to see so much on the guided tour day that you're going to want to see. Oh, I want to go there. I want to go there. I want to go up that mountain. I want to see the Chronicles of Georgia with these massive monoliths. We didn't even get there on the last trip because, again, we just didn't have enough time. You'll probably also want to take in, or maybe you won't, but Tbilisi is known for its sulfur baths. Right in the center of town, you find all of these brick domes like you see pictured here. And it's fascinating. And, one has to be a little bit adventurous to take this in. And most of our members did on the last trip, because if you've ever been to the baths in Istanbul, for example, in Turkey, they're a little bit more rustic than our, modern spas that we have here at home. But the geothermally heated water comes in. It definitely has the smell of sulfur, but the feeling of lying in these baths in these clay domes that are in the middle of the city is really quite a unique experience, and something you just have to try, because it's such a big part of their culture, and you'll learn more and more about that. They have some terrific museums here, where again you get to see stuff from hundreds or thousands of years ago, the evolution of history in this part of Europe, as kind of the tail end of the Silk Road, as it were, that came across. We'll hear a little bit about that as we go through the Alazani Valley, and Tbilisi was one of the stops at the end of the Silk Road. So you'll hear a little bit about all that. And one other thing that I have to mention about Tbilisi, we're going to go back and visit Ascanelli. This is a couple of brothers who have this incredible winery, and they really make an amazing experience because it's more than just a winery. They do some cooking demonstration in their complex of some of the foods that are unique to Georgia. And as I mentioned, the food really is, it totally exceeds everyone's expectations. It's very different and very delicious. And we'll sample not only wines that they've been making since the early 19th century, but also some of the spirits. Let me just say that most of our members came back with big smiles on their faces, maybe a little bit red. We had a lovely day at Ascanelli, and we still have a nice relationship with this family today, which enables us to go and visit this unique winery. Coming out of Tbilisi, we're then going to drive north a couple of hours up to Casbegi. So this is when we're going to get our taste of the high Caucasus Mountains. And so this photo here is another one that I shot with my drone. That is Mount Casbegi itself, which is just over 5,000 meters. We often forget that the highest mountain in Europe is, many people think, of course, it's Mont Blanc in the Alps, but it's actually Mount Elbrus in the Caucasus Mountains. And Casbegi is the third highest mountain in this range here at about 5,050 meters above sea level. So our hotel, and again, we've chosen some great boutique hotels. Some of them are the same as our last trip. Some of them are different, but it literally has this view looking up to this incredible mountain. And this was when we arrived, the sun was going down behind the mountain, just spectacular. And so we'll spend 2 nights here. Last time we only spent 1, but again, I really think it's worthwhile to spend a little bit more time in these places. We'll then have a full day to go up and see the Gergetti Church, which is the little one that was in the first picture there. Again, it's another drone shot that I took. And our wheel and anchor group is meandering around down this church. You look down 2,000 meters to the little village where we're staying, Stepetsminda. We'll also travel up the Dariali Valley, which leads up to the Russian border, and you get this incredible mountain scenery, the gorge. We'll visit the town of Yuta, which is the highest, second highest village in all of Europe at over 2,000 meters above sea level. We'll see some really amazing stuff. And again, the scenery is just breathtaking for these couple of days that we'll spend in the high Caucasus part of Georgia. We'll then head south again, and we're going to make our way to Borjomi, on the way stopping at Gori. And when I was looking through my host notes, I sort of chuckled about this experience. Gori is actually the birthplace of Joseph Stalin. And so he wasn't actually born in Mother Russia, but rather in Georgia. And you get to visit his home. And I will distinctly remember, because when we walked in, it was like literally walking into, Russia during the Cold War. I mean, the people were unfriendly. We had to argue to get a guide. It was, and again, I don't mean to project upon our concept of what Russians are like, but if you had a thought or an image in your mind, it was exactly that. Touring around Stalin's home, and just the whole way the thing was laid out. It was a fascinating visit, and a nice, interesting stop on our way to Borjomi, which is now sort of in the foothills of the Caucasus. It is a lovely little town in a very green valley, and we're going to actually have a whole free day here. This town is known for its for its natural springs. And one of them is the so-called Fountain of Youth. So, of course, part of the ritual is we'll walk into this park, and they give you glasses, and you take a sip of this water, which kind of tastes horrible, frankly, but I feel younger. And we'll have a relaxing day here in Borjomi. We'll spend 2 nights, a chance to sort of reflect on the time that we've had so far, to just rest, because our next day is actually quite a long day, a very exciting day, but a long day. as we make our way from Borjomi. We're going to make 2 stops before we cross the border into Armenia. The first of which is not pictured here, is the Accelsi Castle. We stayed in that castle last time we were there, but the hotel was kind of mediocre, which is why I said I don't really want to do that again. I'd rather have the nights in the very comfortable hotel in Borjomi, but we'll visit the castle, which looks like if you were to picture what a medieval castle looks like, that's what the Accelsi Castle looks like. But then perhaps the highlight of the trip is the Varzya Cave Monastery, which is in the southern part of Georgia, not far from the Turkish border. And so this picture, again, I was able to capture with my drone on our visit there. This is an incredible place. It was built in the 12th century by the monks who built it as a way to sort of as a defensive sort of fortress. There are allegedly as many as 6,000 rooms in this fortress, and as many as 30,000 people lived here at one time. It's quite fascinating, and you get to go up and tour through. Obviously, you can't see even a fraction of it, but you see how they had food stores. They had a chapel underground. They had wine cellars, and so we get to wander around through these caves that were inhabited 1,000 years ago. It's just a fascinating place to visit. And so we'll spend a few hours there before we have lunch nearby in this wonderful valley, and then we'll cross over the border into Armenia and hit Gyumri, which we won't get to until well into the evening, because again, it's a bit of a long day, but I think it was better to organize it this way than rather than stop in sort of mediocre hotels. We'll get to Gyumri, and then the following day we'll have a bit of a tour around this second largest city. Now, I haven't been to Gyumri before, so this was a new addition when we were researching how to make this trip even better. But Gyumri is an interesting town that is not frequented by a lot of visitors. It's a little bit, it's already off the beaten track. But what makes it particularly fascinating is a couple of different things. First of all, the buildings here are black, the historic buildings, because they were all built using a volcanic stone that has this particular tone. And so you see a style of architecture that is, as is pictured here at the Matechi Church. Pardon my pronunciation. And this is reflective of a lot of the buildings in the city center. Here in Gyumri, we'll also have a chance to try the lavash, which is Armenian bread. For me, it was kind of very reminiscent of naan from India. So you sort of wonder, and you'll certainly have to ask the question, how is it that they make bread that is so similar in the way that it is produced as naan in India, and so what the parallels are. And the cuisine in Armenia is, I would say, as good as it is in Georgia. It's just a little bit different. Armenia and Georgia have a very favorable relationship to one another. You'll see the border crossing, it's easy, it's no big deal. And the Armenians are really, really lovely and charming people. I'm not sure which ones I like better. I think I enjoyed, the demeanor of the people here in both places. But of course, Armenia, as we all know, are, they as far as they're concerned, don't have very friendly neighbors. They're not on great terms with the Turkish, and of course they are not at all liking the Azerbaijanis to their east. And there are skirmishes there, nowhere near Yerevan, and it's certainly completely safe to travel to these places. I mean, that's not an issue, but understanding what led to this, the religious aspects, the whole geopolitical situation in this part of Europe is what I think is one of the fascinating things, because we've heard about it, we've read about it, we've read about the Russian invasion into Georgia back about 15 years ago, the occupied territories. We hear about this conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We hear occasionally about the issues between Armenia and Turkey. It's all very fascinating, but Georgia and Armenia, they get along really well. And Yerevan, again, a city that you probably have not thought too much about what could be there, what's it all about. It really surprised me. And it surprised us all in a positive way. It has a sort of an old world kind of a charm to it, but at the same time has some very modern aspects, very bustling, very energetic. And the people here just came across as optimistic about things despite the challenges that they continue to face. While we're in Yerevan, there's a whole bunch of different things to visit. We're going to be staying right in the center of town, not far from the National Museum. And one of the things about Armenia that I know I learned when I was there is I got a tremendous insight into the Armenian Genocide back in 1915. And of course, we have all learned about, the Holocaust and other genocides, but that was one for me and for many of our members that we really didn't understand. And they do a great job of explaining how that all came to pass. And so we'll also visit the Genocide Memorial. And like other places in the world where these terrible tragedies have occurred, it's a sobering moment. But I think it's one of the highlights in the sense that it gives us sort of an understanding and an insight into, historical events and the conflicts and the issues that led to these terrible tragedies. So it's really, really an important place for us to visit. We are going to travel out a little bit to the town of Garni as well to see this so-called Symphony of Stones. This is where all this basalt rock formation has occurred as a result of this collapse of a volcano. Thousands of years ago. If you've been to Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, it's, the formation of the stones is very similar to that. And you don't see this in many parts of the world, but it's truly, truly fascinating. We'll see the pink buildings of Yerevan. I'll switch back to that. They all have this pink hue, again, largely because of the stone that was from the surrounding area that the city was built in. They have a terrific art gallery that is sort of a terrace style building with some tremendous art. Again, we didn't have the time on the last trip to go there. This time we have extra time to wander around and see that. It's a short walk from the hotel. And Yerevan as a whole sits in the shadow of Mount Ararat. And of course, we all know Mount Ararat from the Bible. That's where the allegedly the final resting place of Noah's Ark is. Mount Ararat itself sits actually in Turkey, although this is again one of the disputed things because the Armenians still consider that to be effectively part of their of their country. So a few nights in Yerevan, staying at a wonderful boutique hotel in town. There's a shot of Mount Ararat from the countryside around Armenia. And we will have a lovely farewell dinner before we head out and can continue back home or to elsewhere in Europe. So that gives you a little bit of a taste of the program. So just to give you some logistical information, this program is quite reasonably priced for the 16 nights we're going to be staying there at about $5,000 Canadian. We are, by the way, for those people who book early, so before the end of September, offering an early bird booking bonus of $250 a person. Because we do expect this trip to be fairly popular for next year. We have to secure these hotels because we pick some special hotels and the demand for them is quite high. And let's face it, there's not a ton of hotels to choose from in these countries. So if you want the ones that you want, you have to jump on them and you have to secure them early. And of course, they're clamoring for their rooms back. But again, I think that the value for money here is great because this region is quite affordable compared to traveling in other parts of Europe. Included in all of that, again, 16 nights accommodation at some terrific hotels, breakfast every day. We either have lunch or dinner. Some days we have both, but again, the feedback we gotten from the last trip was that there was so much food in these meals. And of course, it's hard for me to say, don't serve so much food, because that's their hospitality. So you certainly won't starve. We're also including all beverage on this trip. So including local wine and beer is included, which we had last time as well. So again, you can really enjoy this whole trip without having to spend hardly any extra money. And of course, all of the other usual inclusions. The only thing being separate being airfare. I'll talk about that in a second, and insurance, and a minor fee for the Armenian visa, which we can help you get. It's easy to get in advance. Just a quick word about airfare. As I mentioned at the outset, getting there is a little bit tricky, because the connections, you can fly via Paris and Warsaw and Vienna at last check. But the flights often both leave and arrive quite in the middle of the night, just because of the timing to connecting with the international flights. Gives you a sense here of the pricing that's available. One thing that I do recommend in planning this, which we did last time, is plan a stopover in Europe, because you can often do that without any additional cost, have an additional night, just because the timing of the flights is such that it otherwise is a bit of an arduous trip. So I will take some questions now, and I just realized I should always include this one, the first one being about weather. So I'll talk about that in a second. But if you do have any questions about this trip, if you don't get them answered right away today, then please drop us a note to either myself or Paula, and we will make sure that all of your questions get answered. So Paula, in the meantime, are there any questions here on the thing?
Yes, we had a question. You touched on it, but just in case everyone didn't catch it, we had a question come in about if there's visas required.
Only for at the moment. Georgia has not required visas for Canadians at all, at least. Armenia does require an e-visa, so it's basically like an online form that you fill in. It's not a big deal. It's quite cheap, so it's really just a formality. But that's easy to it's easy to address.
Fantastic. We had another question from Helen with regards to how safe is it in Georgia and Armenia?
Yeah, this is a frequent question that we get on any of our trips. Recently we were in the Baltic countries. My answer to that is, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's as safe as traveling to Finland, which has the largest border with Russia and Europe. I suppose it's anybody's guess as to what Russia's next move might be, and I know that there's been some concern from that region about what might happen, and so we're not going to take any risks. If things happen between now and then that would make it a risky proposition to travel there, then obviously we wouldn't go, or we would cancel the trip. I honestly don't see it as a threat. I think Russia has their hands full these days, and they aren't necessarily going to be invading multiple countries on multiple fronts. I hope I'm correct, but in and of itself, there's absolutely no security issue. In fact, these countries are very safe to visit. So I don't see the Russia situation as being a threat. And again, I hope I'm not wrong. We can't not travel to parts of the world just because they're close to Russia, or close to China for that matter. Otherwise, we won't be going anywhere. So.
All right. Perfect. Sandeep had a question here with regards to mode of transportation in between the cities.
So we will be traveling overland because there are relatively few airports in Georgia and Armenia. In fact, there's only two, and one of them is there's one in Tbilisi, and Georgia has another one in Batumi on the Black Sea, but it's not part of our itinerary. So we will be traveling overland in small buses, sort of 15 to 20 seaters, depending on the size of the group. It will be not a large group, so in keeping with our normal philosophy. So there are some longer drives. The roads are quite good. They're all paved. I'd say the roads are in general as good as anywhere in Western Europe. So it's not too much of an issue, but there are some drives of, generally not more than sort of 2 hours at a stint, but like the one day where we travel from Borjomi via Accelsi and Varzya to Gyumri, we'll probably be traveling in total about a good 6 hours of driving that day. It'll be the longest day, I think, of the trip.
Fantastic. I have a question here from Paulette with regards to what the currencies are in destination.
So they have their own currencies, both in Georgia and Armenia. And so you know, ideally you carry those currencies. However, these countries are, you know, becoming more and more accustomed to digital payments, like most of Europe. And so, you know, it seems like every time I go to Europe, every few months, you know, the ability or the need to use cash is less and less and less. So if you use a system like Wise, which is what we recommend as a payment solution, let me tell you, it makes it super easy, because you can buy the local currencies and have them sitting in that account, withdraw them in cash at any bank machine. It makes it very, very easy, and certainly we will provide some more advice on how to do that. But yeah, and of course, as I say, credit cards are accepted almost everywhere other than the little farmers markets and so on. But it's more and more convenient to travel with these new cards like Wise.
Fantastic. Have a question that came in with regards to the language in Georgia and Armenia. How easily is it to get around communicating with English?
So here's the thing. I mean, they have quite a high degree of literacy and education in these towns, in these cities. So what you'll find is that in Tbilisi and in Yerevan, a lot of people will speak English. English is taught mandatory, you know, since 1989, since these countries became independent of the Soviet Union. The younger generation, I'd say they all speak at least some English. The older generation in smaller towns out in the country, it's more of an issue. But generally, when we're traveling out in the countryside, you're with the host, you're with our local guide. So, you know, you're unlikely to be in a situation that is going to be difficult. It's not like traveling in, you know, rural Asia or something like that. You know, it's how can I say? Language is it's not as advanced in terms of English as it is in Western Europe, but it's not far behind.
Good to know. I think always learning some of the local greetings is nice too.
Exactly.
I don't know if you want to circle back. We did have someone ask about weather. Do you want to touch on that in detail?
Yes. So weather. So we picked this time of the year because frankly, it's the best time of the year. Winter's cold, as you can imagine, in this region. Summer is super hot. So the end of September, October is optimal. Temperatures in the mountains, it's a bit cooler, needless to say, when we're up in Stepetsminda and in Casbegi. But generally, you're talking about sort of high teens, low 20s in the day, cooler at night, perfect traveling weather, dry, don't get much rain at this time of the year. It's the best time. It is peak season. And quite frankly, the window of time to travel to these countries is this is the best time of the year, and that's why we're going then. It's also why we're putting this program out early, because also when the hotels fill up fastest. But weather, perfect weather.
Definitely seeing a lot of the accommodations fill up really early for destinations these days, especially these nice little boutique places. So no, I was going to say saving the best for last maybe are one of the most popular questions I seem to get, and we're working on a clone system, but is Gordon going to be hosting this trip?
Good question. I don't know the answer to that. I would say it's 50-50. Gordon would like to be hosting all the trips because that's what he loves to do most, but he's also a pretty busy guy. So yeah, I can't answer that question yet. Quite honestly, it will probably be the spring before I'm able to determine my own hosting schedule. But we have terrific hosts. So if it's not me, it could be Amber, who was actually with us on this trip before, so she's familiar with the destination. It could be Todd. It could be Alfie. It could be Paula. I mean, we're not sure yet, but whatever it is, I guarantee you're going to get a great host, even if it isn't me. So, but thank you. I'll take that as a compliment, Frank.
Another popular question that we seem to be getting, as some maybe have past credits from trips over the last 2.5 years that they are working to use up, is what is our plans for 2024? Gordon, do you want to touch on that?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. I am working on a 2024 planning calendar, which I hope to release by, let's say, middle to late September, because I know that a lot of our members love the kind of places that we're going, but because they're still catching up from the pandemic, people are like, I want to go on that trip. So here's the thing. I think the odds are good that we will be offering all these programs again, including this one. I think that I like to see this as a regular part of our programming, because I think this is a must-see part of the world. So if you can't make it at this time next year, don't fret. It's not a one-off. We're going to be going back. I wanted to go back before because we had a lot of members that couldn't go in 2018 with us. So if you can't make it next year, don't fret. We'll be going back.
Perfect. That wraps up the questions I've received so far.
Good. Well, of course, if you have any other questions, just drop us a note. Happy to answer them. And next week at this time, actually on Tuesday, not at this time, we will be having our webinar on our Palaces of India program. Also, this was the first unofficial Wheel and Anchor program. We went to India, to Rajasthan in when was that? That was in 2017, 5 years ago. Hard to believe. So we're going to be going back. This is an amazing program as well. Do join us for that webinar next Tuesday, August the 9th at 11 o'clock. And let's see, did some other questions come in? Paula put the link to that in the chat box. If you can join us, please do. Of course, the recording of this and all of our webinars will be sent to you, or you can find it on our YouTube channel. So watch out for that. Thanks for joining me today. As you can tell, I love this place because I love, bringing our members to destinations that not everybody else is going to, because I just think they're so much fun, and they're such amazing places. So thanks again. Have yourselves a great day, and look forward to catching up with you next week.